the central issue is how, among the advanced democracies, do we encourage international collaboration on applied R&D. We do very well in collaborating across borders on basic R&D, but we do a very poor job on the applied end of the spectrum. And what is interesting is, despite the fact that there was just a sober discussion about the WTO and trade agreements, which I share as a former trade negotiator, unlike trade and investment agreements and treaties, there are certain norms that govern how international transactions and agreements take place. But in the area of science and technology, unfortunately, and I was the lead science and technology negotiator for the US years ago, there is no norms that are in place with respect to science and technology. There's no national treatment, there's no reciprocity, there's no transparency requirements and the like. And the problem is that these are sovereign to sovereign agreements, just like in the case of investment treaties and trade agreements. But the firms who are the prime actors in trying to collaborate without a robust system of science and technology agreements don't have much of a basis where they can appeal if there are disputes, if there's intellectual property violations. So I think of trade, investment, and science and technology agreements as the three legs of the competitiveness stool. Right now, with all the warts on investment treaties and all the warts on trade agreements, we're missing a significant leg of that stool. Rather, what we've been focusing on as the G7 is largely science diplomacy. So in the United States, now the lead negotiator for science and technology is the State Department, and hence the word diplomacy, science diplomacy, has long been in the lexicon. And one of the papers I did compares text by text what you see in an investment agreement, what you see in a trade agreement, and what you see in science and technology agreement. And to me, it's striking that the verbiage and the statements embodied in the science and technology agreements, frankly, is a lot of fluff. And it doesn't help corporations collaborate with one another. What's the risk? Well, the risk is the country we've just been referring to, which is China. And we do a very poor job as advanced democracy collaborating in order to counter the national security threats, the technology threats, the competitive effects that are coming out of Beijing. And I think what the real challenge for us is to how to deal with some of the problems and opportunities on the horizon. Climate change, how can we collaborate on that in terms of advanced technology to deal with that invented by corporations? How can we deal with the future of wireless, 6G and beyond? How can we deal with supply chain? We just had a long discussion about supply chain. How do we apply artificial intelligence across the world where we have supply chains being obviously run by corporations, but there's not sufficient research from a global collaborative perspective. So one of the things that I've argued for is to put together each of the G7 or whatever the advanced democracies in question might be, a template agreement, a model agreement of S&T, just like we do in investment treaties. And what's the importance of a model agreement? The importance of a model agreement is twofold. One, it's a statement by a sovereign as to what its bare bones agreement will look like. Every agreement is negotiated from that model on a country by country basis. But importantly, and I say this as a former trade negotiator, when you have a model agreement, it becomes a vehicle, when you articulate that agreement, for domestic consensus building. So whether you're within Canada, whether you're within the US, whether you're in Germany, and so forth, there's not a rigorous way to look at what are going to be the rules of the road as a sovereign that we're going to allow our companies to collaborate with in other jurisdictions. So I think one of the proposals that we tabled as part of this group, and Neil Fraser, the former CEO of a healthcare company in Canada, was part of our group, is how can we utilize this notion at the highest levels? And we were heartened that when the UK was in the chair of the G7, They issued this research compact. Unfortunately, it focused on basic science. We've had a lot of discussions in the last year with Bonn and Berlin, and the Germans are in the chair, and obviously this is now going to move to the Japanese side in January. The question is, how can we bring to the table the corporations, the government interests to move forward among advanced democracies to champion and provide a way to collaborate on applied R&D among the firms in the advanced democracies. And I don't know what the CD Howe's agenda is, but I can tell you there's a rich set of issues that still need to be looked at, particularly case studies, whether it's in the advanced technology for pollution abatement, whether it's in the future of geo-wireless. And I think there's a tremendous interest by corporations to make some advances here. I think the central question for the WTO is China. And I've written fairly widely about this, having spent a lot of time in China and helping them put together trade agreements way before they joined the WTO. And to me, if we want to be serious about that kind of organization, it seems to me that we present China with three options. One, let's look at your accession agreement. You haven't implemented virtually anything or the majority of those commitments. You got a choice. You implement those agreements now. We know that that's not going to be done under Xi. Two, you step aside from the WTO and renegotiate your entry into the organization. And while you're renegotiating, you're obviously not going to be enjoining MFN tariffs and the like, but you're going to renegotiate. And if you are able to, through the unanimous consensus procedure, are able to rejoin the WTO, those will be the terms. Or three, just say goodbye. And it seems to me that that's the adult approach. And I don't mean goodbye in a silly way. I say, you clearly want to work in a world that is not what many advanced democracies, liberal democracies want. Indeed, maybe, I don't know about 164 other countries, but a large number of other countries who are members. And let's say to China, listen, you can have whatever economy you want, but you can't have your cake and eat it too. I spent about 10, 15 years on the ground in China going through SOE after SOE, and I can't tell you today what a price is in China. I can't tell you that the price that you might face is subsidy free. I don't know how to measure the subsidies in China. And so the lack of transparency about the guts of their transactions makes it very difficult, and I think almost economically meaningless to look at the flows of trades, the trade balances. That's in my view, that's a half a century old perception. And as you've just noted, Dan, I mean, the technology and the composition of the trade has changed dramatically. But it's a choice about what kind of world do we want. And I don't mean this from an ideological perspective. I'm talking about, the national security issue, I think, is absolutely numero uno. And we're kidding ourselves, I think, if we have this discussion in an antiseptic way, without respect to the national security challenges. I used to sit on CFIUS, the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States, way before China. Japan was the problem then. Right now, I must say I applaud what the Biden administration is doing in terms of changing some of the terms to this executive order on CFIUS. And I think that's a realistic view of what China is.